Hey, good evening, everyone. At tonight's meeting, Sunday, February 16th, 7 p.m., Zoom meeting number three on our season, our final Zoom meeting. I will welcome everyone to the Rochester Area Officials Association. We're going to discuss a little bit about basketball rules and positioning and sort of more or less a Q&A, and we want to make this as interactive as possible. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Eric Rain as he did get a couple questions that floated in, and hopefully those stir some more discussion. Eric, go ahead. Let's do this.
All right, hi everyone. Couple things too with this. If while I'm going through the questions I got emailed, if you have a question, throw it in the chat. We'll keep an eye on that. And then I will also open up spots for people to interject or add thoughts or ask more questions. We'll just start. One of the emails I got said to go over the opening jump ball and some of the things that can happen there. So that's when the clock first starts ticking for us. So we'll start with the jump ball. Not only do we need to be aware of what the jumpers can do, what the people that are on the circle around it can do, we also need to be prepared for what can happen immediately after the ball is tipped. My varsity game Tuesday night, ball got tipped. Player 83 grabbed it with 1 foot in their front court and 1 foot in the air, possessed the ball, and then the foot in the air came down in the back court. So 2 seconds into the ball game, we have an over and back violation. Remember to go over and back. You have to have possession, so the arrow goes to the other team. And then we had a throw in at the 28-foot mark with 20 seconds on the clock for the team that did not commit the over and back violation. Same thing. You can have a travel right out the gate. They gather the ball and then stutter step to come to a stop. That again is possession. So the arrow goes to the other team. And then depending on if they're in their front court or back court, your shot clock and throw in spot are determined by those. So a lot can happen in those first 2 or 3 seconds once the jump ball leaves the hand. Not only more than two taps by the jumpers, if they tip it before it reaches the highest point, we need to be prepared. It was on one of the quiz questions um, that that if the violation is by one of the two jumpers, we're going to go division line throw in, and then 35 on the shot clock. If the violation, like someone runs onto the circle before the ball is tapped, that's whether they're front court or back court. You got to be ready to determine that. We had a question in the chat about the over and back portion. To establish front court position, 3 points must enter the front court. That is only if the player with the ball is dribbling. So if I'm in my back court and I'm dribbling the ball, in order to get front court status during a dribble, both feet and the ball have to touch the front court. Um, if we're not dribbling the basketball, if I possess the ball with both hands like this and I pick 1 foot up in the air and that other foot is in the front court, I'm front court established. If I'm dribbling, then all three have to touch the front court before we have front court status. So that's one of those tricky ones where you have to know if they're dribbling or not dribbling. So, great question, and I've seen that go both ways. And I'm sure if I could remember back to all the games I've worked over the years, I've kicked that one myself too. So, um, but there again, you just as you're taking the court, yeah, you do the fist bump with your crew at the table, and you go across. When you're going across, you need to lock in and be prepared for that first 5 seconds. Some teams have a set play off of the tip if they have someone that they know can jump and win the tip. Um, some teams, the one that always comes to mind is Goodhue Boys. They purposely lose the opening tip. So you need to be ready for those situations as well. They can tip and go for a play for someone on the wing sets a back screen, and the next thing they're throwing a lob to the hoop, and we need to be ready to officiate those plays and just be ready at the start of the game. I'm trying to think if you go over your jump ball in the rule book and the violations, that's always a good one to review in your pregame. Know your shot clock, things like that. So Any more questions with jump ball or thoughts?
Got a couple more thoughts as I got my rule book open to page 51. Jump ball administration. If we touch the ball more than twice, so we throw it up, we have a good toss, and A1, it taps it once, they tap it twice, they tap it a third time. That's a violation. B gets the ball at the division line. I believe we'd go division line on that with the 35-second shot clock. Yes, because we've actually talked to MJ about this. And
Yep.
then um, yeah, B would get the ball, A would get the arrow. So that call is going to come from U1. That's the primary for that. Not saying that U2 couldn't make it, not saying that the referee couldn't make it, but it should come from U1. My catch, okay, let's see here. Touch the toss ball before it reaches its highest point. This is what we classify as stealing the jump ball. And you'll see this once in a while where they just try and jump early enough and they try to steal the jump. It's tough to catch, but that is an advantage gained. That's a violation. I mean, it's not a foul, it's just a violation. So, if A1 would steal the jump, it's a violation on A. B gets the ball, a division line throw in, 35 on your shot clock, and then A would get the arrow. Um, I had a play in a playoff game. Oh, it was probably almost 15 years ago. I'm U2 on the play, and I got two players. It was a girls' game. I got two girls that are jockeying like hell for position. And we calmed them down. They were all situated. Yeah, the referee blows the whistle. That ball becomes live as soon as the ball leaves the referee's hand. Well, what I have on the backside of that, before the ball is even touched, I got a player pulling down the other player, and I end up having two players lying on the ground before the ball is even touched. I got a foul. Okay. So I whistled it, foul. We didn't have any seconds come off the clock. It's a live ball foul because that ball is live as soon as it leaves the referee's hand. So it's not a dead ball tech. So I reported the foul. The other team got the ball at the division line, and you would have a 35-second shot clock, and the team that fouled would get the arrow. So just some goofy situations. One thing that I make sure that I do when I step in for the jump ball is I make sure that everyone's feet are equal. And what do I mean by that? I don't care if they're on the circle, if they're not on the circle, I make sure that their feet are equal. So it's not one player is positioned behind the player next to them. I just make sure that their feet are even. Some thoughts, Eric. Back to you.
Yeah, I mean, I think sometimes the jump ball stuff can catch us off guard because 99.9% of the time the jump ball goes easy peasy. Someone taps it, someone gathers it and goes. But when we as officials need to be prepared for that 0.1% of the time where something weird happens. One other play I had this year that a coach got all up in arms about, and I just said, hey, that's not the correct ruling. They wanted a violation. Ball was tossed, legally touched, and then one of the non-8 jumpers ran into the circle after the ball was touched to gather the ball that was tapped by one of the jumpers. If you are still on page 51, once the ball is touched by one or both jumpers, then they can break that center circle restraining line. But until it is touched, they cannot. And the same is for the jumpers. They cannot leave that circle until it is touched. So for example, we'll go back to Goodhue boys. So they know they're not going to have their jumper jump for the ball and let the other team tap it. The person in the circle for them still has to stay in their half of the circle until that ball is touched. they can't run out of there trying to get ahead of it and catch the ball. I've seen that a couple times too. So, um, all right. Next question. Is there anybody else has a question? I don't see anything in the chat. We can move on to the next email question I got. All right. Screens. With the 35-second shot clock and the pace of play in the high school game now, screens continue to be harder and harder to officiate. Not only do we have the dribble handoff screens, we have the weave up top where they dribble, drive, and kick and then hand it off kind of at the top of the key. We have post players playing at the corner of the free throw line that are cutting up and setting a screen. Couple things with screens. Uh, Blind screens, depending on the speed of the person they're screening. If the person they're trying to set a screen on is moving, they need to allow, if it's a blind screen, time and distance that allows that person time to go around the screen, meaning they need to come to a stop, not a split second before contact, but they need to give them a step or two on a stationary opponent on a blind screen or a stride or two on a moving opponent to go around. They need to be feet need to be shoulder width apart, and but they do not have to be facing the person. A screen can be set facing any direction. It just matters when that person comes to a stop. With the feet shoulder width apart, if their feet are set out way wide, but the person they're screening runs into their torso, it's a legal screen. If their feet are way wide and the only thing that hits the person they're screening is that leg that's past their shoulders and that trips them and it was the leg, then you have an illegal screen because they're wider than their base. Those are kind of the key points we're looking for. If we're a ball handler and we're doing a handoff and then a screen, all the same screening principles apply. We need to be stationary, we need to be within our frame, and we need to come to a stop before contact, whether it's blind or not. So, it's hard. They screen and roll. They're constantly moving. Um, One thing I always pregame with my partners is if the ball is not in your primary and there's a lot of screening action near where the ball is, that's where you can go outside your primary to help. Don't help on the ball. The primary official has the ball handler help with the screening action. So, thoughts, questions there?
If you want to clean up your game, get off ball screens, call them, be consistent, and you will have a great, smooth flowing game by the end. Okay? My case in point the other night, Friday night, I had a boys' track meet. It was up and down. We were all over the place. I called three illegal screens all in the second half. Okay? And ref off ball. Be very strong in off ball. When I take a look, at making assignments, especially we get into later in the playoffs, you have to be excellent in off ball because your game can go right in the tank if you do not call off ball. Eric, back to you.
Yeah. The biggest one I've seen this year has been that corner of the free throw line on the dribble drive kick. Um, for leads, if you're in a game where there's no true post play action, nobody on the block, there's not a lot of people. I can think of a handful of teams that have a post player that likes to play on the block and get the ball down low. Uh, get a little wider and extend your coverage area up to that kind of free corner of the free throw line. If they're clearing one side and running a pick and roll situation, pick up that pick and roll. If the defense switches, it's a little harder to call that a moving screen. But if you see the defender trying to go under the screen and they roll into it, that is a great off ball call for a partner to help out. While the primary official has the ball handler going around the screen and they're going to have that other defender's probably going to try and do a little help and get him to slow down while their teammate is trying to go under the screen. So just something to work on. Anybody have any examples or anything that's happened this year with screens that they have a question on or thoughts?
I think for me personally, I was glad that you hit on the two eyes. Making sure we have two officials looking at it, making sure we have C&T Rain. I know you and me had one in Dover. I was T, you were C. You were able to get it because I had a competitive matchup on ball and saw an illegal screen come in. Kind of the same thing actually happened to me yesterday. I'm trail and the lead came up and got it. This girl was trying to set a screen, didn't land in time, and it blew up completely on me because I had a competitive on ball matchup. So I just the comment of I think that the four eyes on each screen really does help clean up the game.
Yeah. And one final thought. I had a game today and we had a play where I was the off-ball official and we had a screen coming and I watched the screener run over to set the on-ball screen. And for you, if you're the primary official on that play and you have a lot in your lap and it kind of blows up on you, take an extra second and see if your partners were looking at it for you to help. We had an illegal screen that the screener was still running, and then the ball handler took off too soon and ran their defender into the screener, and it knocked the screener down. And the on-ball official didn't let us get there in time and immediately called to push through the screen. And both myself and the other off-ball official were inhaling and ready to ship it because the screener never came to a stop. So if you're that on-ball official and you've got the ball and you've got a screen on the ball and you feel like everything's on top of you because you don't have a lot of space on a sideline, take a little bit of an extra breath and see if one of your officials that has a wider angle and is a little farther away and has that better angle of everything that's happening with the screen um, can come and help. You can always come in just a little bit late on that screen if you're the primary official and you don't have help from your C or your lead or your trail, whoever the off-ball official is. Um, because if you have the ball and then a screen coming, things happen fast. And like Zach said, there's a lot of action on that ball for the primary official. So, all right. The last thing I got an email question about was arc plays and what is a secondary defender. And this one could go on for a while. We we all, especially on the fast break, defining, is it an odd number? Is there more offense and defense? I don't know how we're supposed to have time to count. If it's one-on-one, you don't have to count. Is it two-on-one, three-on-one? Um, Kind of the best advice I can come up with is if I'm going to be the new lead and I'm trucking down for a fast break lead, just officiate the play. Because if we have a collision and bodies on the floor, the worst possible thing is no whistle. So official closest to it, just officiate the play and do your best. If you can pick up that it's a two-on-one and feet in the arc and all that stuff, great. If you're the center official or even especially the trail official, you can't really help on any of the contact from the backcourt. You can start counting bodies and help on how many are in the fast break. Same thing in the front court. C and T have a great look at feet in the arc on these crash plays going to the hoop. Um, be ready to help with those. Um, but we just need to officiate the play, and then if someone has knowledge that needs to change the play, come in and help with it. It's never going to be a fun situation if you have to come in and change a play from a charge to an arc call. Speaking from experience, it makes people very upset at times, but it's the rule, and that's what we have to do. If you're going to come in and help with that information, have the number, and don't come in and say, I think. Say, this was a secondary defender. They were in the arc. Their number is 12. You need to change it to a blocking foul because of the arc, and then let the primary official change their call. Um, what is a secondary defender in the front court when we're running a set offense? Zones can be a little trickier. I always look at it this way. If there was someone that was supposed to be stopping them, before they got to the hoop, then the person at the hoop is probably a secondary defender. It's a little easier in a matchup zone where they're each grabbing a person and then switching screens, but a man-to-man defense, very clear and obvious when someone's sliding over to help. But you kind of have to identify who the primary matchup was when they're cutting, whether with the ball or without the ball. And this again, kind of like Jared's earlier comment about being really good off ball. You need to identify who's cutting to the hoop and who they're trying to get past first, and then identify if that defender that's next in line is sliding over to help. That's your secondary defender. Um, and then just be aware, did they establish legal guarding position outside the arc and backpedal in? Were they in the arc and never got out? Then you have an arc foul. Um, and then the last thing with it is, and this is the one that really gets us in trouble, and I've seen the most inconsistency on it, is the training tapes are telling us that if there's a planted secondary defender in the arc and there's any contact, Nickleby says call a foul. My personal opinion does not matter. I'm not the coordinator of officials for the state high school league. I feel like if it's a play that was outside the arc and we're not putting a whistle on it, I still tend to not put a whistle on all those, but that's not what our training tapes say, and that's not what the state wants us to do. They're saying if you have contact with a planted secondary defender, whether the shooter lands fine and everybody's okay and we can move on and play, they're saying blocking arc foul. It's really easy to talk about on a Zoom meeting. It's really easy to talk about when you're looking at clips on a training tape, but I think it's really hard for all of us to get consistent with it in games. It feels like you're putting a whistle on a play that doesn't need a whistle, and it's a hard habit to get out of. It's easy when there's a crash and there's two bodies on the floor because we know we need a whistle. But we still need to identify those secondary defenders, and if they're impeding the shooter to land and causing any displacement of them, what they want us to do is call a blocking foul because of the arc. So,
If there's
thoughts?
physical contact and they're in the restricted arc and they are on the ground, yeah, they want a blocking foul call.
Yep.
And the coachability to it, okay, when the coach questions you, you tell the coach, if your secondary defender jumps and jumps straight up, the arc is off. And Jason preaches that they have to be elevated. Your boys teams, especially 3A and 4A boys teams, are very good at it. That when they're getting ready to take it, they're going to jump straight up and they're trying to block shots. Thank you for jumping because now you just took that arc right out of that equation. But if they are standing there and that shooter comes down and there's physical contact and the defense doesn't shoot to the ground, the defense stands there and boom, there's physical contact and they're still both straight up and down. Secondary defender, it should be a block and a point. So I've missed them as well because I'll say, nope, that's a no foul or it's a no call. No, technically they want a whistle on that. So
And then just so we don't all start calling 15 arc plays a game, just remember on an offensive rebound in the post area and they go back up, you do not need to call an arc play there. What they want is when there is a play where a second defender is sliding over to help, either like Jared said, they need to elevate, jump, and get off the floor, and then you just have a normal play on, or if they weren't there legally, then just a normal blocking foul. But you want to give that defense time to recover on the rebounds. Normal play, if they would have had time to either get out of the way, jump in the air, or be there quicker and establish outside the arc on the initial play to the hoop, fine. But offensive rebounds and that offensive player gets that rebound 5 feet from the hoop, they do one power dribble and go back up. We are not looking for arc plays on that. Just straight up block charges and or play ons. You do not need to put an arc call on those. We're looking at drives to the basket from the perimeter and things like that. So,
So
and
two
that's
thoughts here. on these blocks with the restricted arc, if you come in as the C or T to change a call, or you're at least coming in to have a discussion saying, hey, are you sure? Okay. Here's what I would tell you. When you come on in, you make sure that you have your number that you're going to change it to, should you change it to. And before you start the discussion, ask your lead, do you have your correct number? That's going to slow you down as the C or T coming in, but it's also going to slow down your lead. So now you have the number that you would change it to, and your lead also has that number. So we have two numbers. We don't even need to share the numbers, but just slow down and ask, do you have your number? Because when we have players that go down to the ground, or one stands up and doesn't go down to the ground, but one does, and all of a sudden now we have other players coming on in and they cross each other, and now we're into dead ball, and you're like, shoot, was that four or was that five? I mean, it can happen like that. So slow down and make sure we have numbers both ways. Now get into, hey, we need to turn this. I got the number. Here's the number. Go ahead and whistle. That's point one. Point two, be careful. I've seen a couple people do this year, and it leads to a very good conversation where they come and they know that the player is in the restricted arc. I mean, heck, the whole gym knows that the player is in the restricted arc. And they will go block and they'll point at the arc. Be careful with that, because what you're saying when you point at the arc, you are saying if that player was outside the arc, this is a player control. Okay? And I've seen people point to the arc because they're trying to help sell the fact that the player's location was going to make it a block anyways. Okay? If it's a straight up block because the player never got legal, it's a fist and a block, and there's no point involved. Because the minute that we bring that point in, what we're saying is that this is a player control if that player is outside the arc. So just be careful with that. So Eric, anything to add?
Yeah, just to give you an example of what Jared just mentioned with that not pointing. If I'm your center official and you're the lead in transition and we have a one-on-one and we have that collision at the hoop, there's no arc on that play. If you're my lead and you go block and point to the floor, I'm coming in and saying, there's no arc in play. You have to ship that. And if you look at me and go, well, it was a block anyway, I'm going to go, well, I'm going to use a four-letter word under my breath, and then we're going to try and make the best out of a really bad situation because we're still going to have to keep a block on that. And it's not fun. And so just make sure you're not using it, like Jared said, to sell a play. Just call the play. If you have a block, call block. Whichever coach is getting the foul, if they're not going to agree with it, it doesn't matter if you point at the floor or not to help sell it. They're not going to like the call anyway. So just call what you have and it'll keep you out of the soup as a crew. So,
From
uh,
a mechanic coverage standpoint, if we have a one-on-one matchup coming from the C with the primary defender, it's primary and it's primary only. That is the C's whistle at the bucket. Lead, do not blow. If you blow, it's a cadence whistle, it's a late whistle, but it's a C's drive primary one-on-one. Now, if we flip it over to the lead side of the lane and we have a drive coming from trail, stay connected with it, but it's coming in on the lead side of the lane, primary defender. That is lead's whistle. Lead should be making that call. Now, we throw both of those situations in there, and Jason says this best. If it's the secondary defender at all in the lane, and that's over on the C side of the lane, That is the lead's whistle. And we get into problems here because we have double whistles. Okay? And I'll tell you what, I'm just as guilty of that as the next official. Understand who should be taking that foul to the table. And furthermore, your C and your T, okay, those outside officials, if you pop with your lead and you both fist it, C and the T do not show, okay? Because the lead can be showy, meaning that they're going to show block, they're going to show player control a little bit quicker than the outside official. So, just some advice, that's all. Thank you.
Yeah, when I start thinking back all the way to late November, early December to now to the situations that kind of, if you ref long enough, you can remember back to the season, the plays that make you cringe on your season that kind of make you wonder what you were doing in that situation. The majority of the time for me, it's when I had a double whistle that I shouldn't have had a double whistle on. It was either my primary or my partner's primary, and then things kind of fell apart quickly, not necessarily because, like Jared said, I don't think we showed right away, but we lost a number. Well, they had this person with foul, I had that person with a foul. If the non-primary official just takes that extra second or two to let the primary have a chance to crack, it cleans up a lot of the things that make us cringe when we're out on the court. And this is coming from personal experience. Um, just kind of following up what he said. We have a comment in the chat. I'll go over here with this secondary defender stuff. So what I'm seeing in the chat is it's a block call if it's a stationary secondary defender in the arc with contact, correct? If they jump vertically, then it's a play on. And if they jump vertically, and I kicked a call this year, secondary slid over, jumped in the air, offensive player crashed into him, and they ended up 6 feet behind the backboard on the floor. Um, if it's that big of a crash, you can still ship it because they legally jumped in the air. Most of the time, what you're going to have is just a little bit of contact and they'll both fall down. But if you have a big collision and they go flying, I'm thinking if you're at like a Byron or a Lourdes and they're almost all the way to the tarp there behind the backboard or to the bleachers on the end line or the wall on the end line at Lourdes, you can ship it if you think it's that big of a collision. And then the last one in the comment was if secondary in the arc and it would have been a charge, it is a block with a point to the arc. All your arc plays are going to be the same mechanic, whether it's a planted, stationary, and there's nobody on the floor, but there was contact, or if you have the collision, everything with it, if your arc play is going to be the same mechanic where stop the clock with a fist, block signal, and then point to the floor. Hope that covers everything with the question. Last thing I was going to go over that I had planned for was just going with our coach communication, especially now as we, postseason is starting. And it doesn't matter whether you're on a high school game, you're working a youth something for Nicometto, whatever you're doing, just remember it's been a long year for us as officials. It's the same for the coaches. And some of these coaches, the example I'll give is last Friday night, 2 Fridays ago, running clock game. Benches are emptied. You have the JV players on the varsity court playing, and this coach is winning big, but he's got this JV player that he's been working with because one, he might need him if there's a foul trouble or an injury in postseason. It's a taller kid. He knows he's going to need him next season to step up on some big varsity minutes and kind of be their big defender in the middle. And he's been working hard with this person. And we as a crew, we're thinking it's a 40-point game. Just manage this, make the easy calls. Don't let anything get away from us. Well, he's working hard with this player, And I get the first foul on the player because they go up to play defense and they've got their hands down like this as the ball handler gathers and goes up through their arms without their arms were illegal with before the ball handler got there. I make the explanation. The coaches talk to me is good. Two or three times up and down the floor, same defensive player. This time they keep their hands straight above their head, but they slide a little bit. But the coach just sees that he got his player to finally not bring his arms down and try and block the shot. He's legal, and we have a blocking foul. 40-point game. This coach is winning by 40 points, and they go nuts for just a little bit. And my partner is baffled by this. And I'm sitting on the other side of the court going, well, I know why the coach is going nuts is because he's been working with this player all year and he's finally getting him to start to get his hands above his head. Sometimes it's not about the fall call. Sometimes they're just frustrated with 4 or 5 months of working with the player and trying to get him to do something. And they think they finally made a point, and then we have a foul call. Doesn't excuse the behavior. Just remember, sometimes they're not mad at us, and our communication just needs to be okay. Let them let off their steam a little bit within reason. I mean, if there's certain things they say they cross a line, you got to do your job. But just remember, even in the blowouts, even if it's a youth game, even if it's this or that, our communication, we need to understand both sides of the coin, if that makes sense. We're only seeing that one night. We don't know what they've seen on every game this year. If it's playoffs, especially, these coaches are watching the season come to an end. They're losing seniors, so just a little more grace. And I know it's hard because it's been a long year, and we've all been going through a lot of stuff too. But just remember, our communication needs to be from understanding, rule book knowledge, and then just probably a little extra patience. So, and then Jared, you threw
Flopping.
flopping. Go for it.
All right. So had a game a couple of weeks ago, and Mike Claviter, who's on the call here, and Dan Riesgraf and I up at Zumbrota. And we call a flop in the first half on Goodhue. That reported off. We call a flop on Zumbrota Mazeppa, second half, reported off. We still have 12 minutes to go. When during the dead ball after the second flop, I just said to all the players on the court, I said, hey, boys, I said, listen up. I said, we have another flop in this game. It's a team tech. Don't be flopping. I'm going to take it right in the chest and we're good to go because we got to flop each way. Sure enough, a few minutes go by. I got a flop. Now it's a team tech. I delayed my whistle because they were trying to take a shot, rebound, still I'm trying to go to the hoop. Now I got an off-ball rebounding foul about 5 seconds later. So I called the foul and then I whacked the kid going back in time about 5 seconds. So now we got sort of a mess. And we sorted through it with the coaches. The rebounding foul was like the fifth common foul, so we don't have any free throws there. What we did was we shot the tech and we gave the offended team the ball at the division line with the 35-second shot clock. My question to MJ, I called her that night, I said, all of this flop talk that we had at the beginning of the season, it's all about making sure that we have some kind of team control, making sure that we're not taking away that quick basket, delaying that flop warning. But I said, MJ, I said, the State High School League hasn't chatted much about what happens once you have the warning. Now, do we call the tech right away for the second flop or do we delay it? If you read Jason's note on Friday, he, I just reread it right here about 5 minutes ago. He does say in there that, if you would have a flop and it's the second one, so now we're going with the technical, just be careful in blowing your whistle so quickly. Because if I blow my whistle when that shot is released, we know by rule that there's no team control once a shot is released. Wait for that ball to I'm gonna be rebounded, to be secured. Wait for that ball. I'm gonna not to take away, okay, to lay up or a charge to the basket. So I guess I'm sort of throwing this out here more for discussion's sake than anything. That going back to our game, yeah, we probably could have handled it somewhat better, but sort of the message I'm getting from the State High School League, even with that second flop on the same team, be careful when you blow your whistle. You might have to delay until we have team control. Well, Eric, anything to add? And Mike, anyone else, anything to add?
Um, I guess too, if you've had your flop warning, always consider this. If the technical flop is by the team that has possession of the ball, kill it right away because you don't want them to get a scoring opportunity. But 99 times out of 100, it's the defensive player flopping. Um, and that's what Jared's talking about is you need to be patient. Um, if they are on the attack mode and going to the hoop or dribbling and kicking for a three, and that's what they've been doing all game, don't kill their offensive opportunity. Once that shot goes in, then you could administer the tech on the defense. Um, Thinking back to some of the conversations I heard Nickleby at the St. Charles preseason meeting all the way back in the years, does not want a lot of these, but if you get to that point where a defensive team is flopping and they get a technical, he wants it to hurt. So if they hit a three and then you call a tech and they make both free throws and they get the ball and they come in and hit another three, I guarantee an 8 point trip down the court is going to cure all of your flopping issues for the rest of that game and probably all the other crews that have that team the rest of the year. Um, and then, yeah, Scott, that's a great comment. When you have the flop, immediately show it so everybody knows you have a flop on that play. One, so that the coaches know, okay, we just flopped if it's the first one or the second one. Two, it lets your partners know that's in my primary. I saw it, and this is what I have. Because uh, you get a flop signal. If you don't get a flop signal and you have a flop, and next thing you know, your partner's coming in off ball saying, "Oh, they didn't see that," and putting a block or a charge on a play that was a flop, that would be bad. So signal your flop right away, but just withhold your whistle until the right time. And then on the play Jared was talking about in Zumbrota, you have the rebounding foul, but the tech occurred first. Just take a couple extra seconds, make sure you're handling things in the order they occurred. If that would have been a bonus free throw foul, Jared, what would you have done?
Would have shot the tech with nobody in the lane. Then I would have put people back in the lane and we would have shot the bonus at 1-1 and we would have resumed off of the bonus shot.
Nope.
Nope. Well, I
You
guess I
shoot
got that one wrong.
you shoot the lane cleared on all free throws, preferably preferably the preferably the team that's not going to get the ball off the technical. Let them shoot first. If one team's getting free throws for the rebounding foul and the other team's getting free throws with the tech, but your technical foul is always going to result in a possession of the ball. So you'd have the lane cleared for all free throws, and then the team that received the ball for the technical will get the ball at the division line, half court throw in.
So you would not shoot them in the order of occurrence, is what you're saying.
Uh, Correct. If you shoot the tech first, if one team is getting all the free throws, just make sure the person that got fouled on the rebounding shoots their bonus free throws, and then they can pick anyone on the court or a substitute in for the technical foul free throws, and then the ball at the division line for a throw in. If it's opposite, where the team that flopped is the team that gets the bonus free throws for the foul, make sure that person shoots their free throws first with the lane cleared, then go to the other end of the floor, shoot the technical foul, and throw in at the division line.
And just so we're clear too, that a throw-in after a technical foul is at the division line. Shot clock is 35 seconds. It is not 20, it's 35. A question from Barb in the chat. So would you still show the flop signal on the second flop on the same team or not? If you would call the tech right away because the situation warrants that, you wouldn't show the flop. But sort of like Eric said, 9 times out of 10, there's going to be a delay. So sure, I would show that again once they secure the ball. Now, pop my whistle, foul, a technical foul. It's a team tech. It does not go on a player. It does not go on the coach. It just simply goes on the team. So if they were at 9 team fouls, they're now at 10. That's it. And it goes down in the book as a team tech. And they can get as many team techs as they want, but it is still going to be 2 shots in the ball. So anything else on flopping? So the
So,
flop tech supersedes the common foul for who gets the ball out of bounds after the tech free throws. That was our big question, Eric. Is that what you're saying?
yep. Unless you have offsetting technical fouls or an intentional foul after the flop, unless you have a foul that results in free throws in the ball, a technical foul penalty is 2 free throws in the ball. So unless there's another foul that changes that status after the flop by by the continuation of the attack to the basket, say you have an intentional foul on the rebounding action, okay, well, the technical foul happened first, and then we have an intentional foul by the other team after the flop. Well, intentional foul results in possession of the ball as well. But if you have a technical foul and a common foul, it's the resumption of play is always going to be after the free throws with the ball at the division line for a throw in for the team that didn't commit the technical foul, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think it just felt odd because how often does a technical foul happen before a common foul? So,
Yep, and this is kind of the only one that it can happen with is these flop penalties. Everything else, I'm trying to think if there's another. The only other technical foul you're going to kind of wait for is if a coach calls you an MFer in transition while the other team's going on a fast break. You're going to let that fast break finish and then tech the coach. But even then, that's the last thing you do is you let the play finish and then you call the tech. So, yeah, this flop situation it's going to cause some weird things. And just like the arc, our first few years with the arc, the league started watching things and figuring things out and had more direction for us in years 2, 3, and 4 with the arc than we had in year 1. So hopefully after this we get some better direction and more guidance on it, and they'll have more plays that we're seeing. So
Okay, Eric, I got another one for you because this is just sort of grinding my gears here a little bit. So we got a flop, and now we got the tech coming. We showed the signal, and they're taking the ball back to the rack. Whack. They score the bucket. So now I'm taking the tech on team B, and I'm taking a common foul on team B to the table. So I'm going to report, I'm probably going to report the common foul first, score the bucket. Then I'm going to report the tech. And what you're telling me is that we shoot the one shot for the made basket with the lane cleared for that player. And then we go to coach, who do you want to shoot the free throw? And they can pick somebody from their bench. Okay, the shooting team, not the opposing team. I got that this year. Hey, do we get to choose their shooter on attack? That's in the NBA, I believe they do that, but it's not in high school. So they bring it. Okay, so they bring A7 off the bench to shoot the tech, fine. And then they get the ball at the division line because of that tech. Am I correct with that? Am I correct with that?
Correct. And just remember, I see this a lot. I do this a lot because when you have a technical foul, everybody's hair on the back of their neck kind of tingles a little bit, and you know you're not in a fun situation. Slow down for a second. A lot of times, especially with a technical foul on a player for attitude or slamming the ball or frustration, before we start administering free throws, take care of subs, especially if it's a tech on a player for attitude. Let that coach get that player out of the game and on the bench so they're not milling around amongst their opponents, who probably is what was causing them to have a bad attitude to begin with. Um, let the sub come in. Now, if the coach for the team shooting the free throws brings in a player to shoot the free throws, that's fine. Just remember this. Whoever comes in the game, whoever leaves can't come back in the game till the clock runs. All right. I've seen a couple times this year we're letting subs back in after free throws here and there, and the clock hasn't run. We need to be aware of who went out, and that player can't come back in the game until time has come off the clock. The player they brought in to shoot can leave the game before we put the ball back in play, but it has to be somebody that was on the bench that wasn't already in the game when the tech was called, if that makes sense. Question in the chat about uh, if the coach, if you have you don't report a number for a flop tech. It's just a team technical. The coach probably knows who did it because I can't imagine there's multiple bodies laying on the floor during a flop warning. But no, there's no number to report for a flop tech. It's just a team technical. That team technical category, same thing. If you have a player that dunks or snaps the rim in warmups, it's a team tech. There's no number it goes on anymore. So, and then also your delay game warnings, breaking the plane. If they did that multiple times, it's no longer on a player for breaking the plane. It would be on a player if they touch the inbounder or hit the ball with your intentional and technical fouls there. That would be on the individual player that hit that. But breaking the plane or delaying the game with huddles or failing to get out of all those different team warnings there, those are all team techs, no numbers reported. So
Well, okay, so let's go through just a couple of quick things here because we were talking about a lot. So let's go back to the subs, and then I want to talk about the warnings, Eric. So, so let's say that we have that technical foul, okay, within a game, and the coach says, I want A6 to come in for A5 to shoot the tech. Legal. And we bring in A6, A5 goes to the bench. We make both free throws, and coach says, A7, now you're in for A6. A6 goes to the bench. Is that legal?
yes.
Okay. Now, during that throw in, we have heavy defensive pressure, and Team A calls a timeout. The timeout now, in the middle of the timeout, before the warning horn, A5 and A6 report to come back into the game. Can they come back into the game?
No, they cannot.
Because why?
Because the clock has not had any time come off it yet. You need a legal touch inbounds so that you have that point three at least come off the clock before you can bring a player back in the game who subbed out. Doesn't matter if there was a timeout. You could have team A call a timeout, then team B call a timeout. Until that clock runs, any player that has been subbed out of the game, they are not allowed back in until the clock runs.
Very good. I just wanted to walk through that. I've been caught with that a couple of times, and it's all about the player that was subbed out. Okay, because the coach can run through a whole bunch of subs if they want to, but once the player is subbed out, that player has to sit on the bench at least for a tick of the clock. Is is that a good way to
Correct.
look at it, Eric?
Yep. Yep.
Okay. Okay. What you brought up warnings. What are the four warnings? Okay, now we're getting off a flop. Okay, so what are the four warnings that would constitute a team warning and now could generate a technical foul later on in the game? Can you go through those warnings?
Yeah, I was trying to get to that page in the rule book quick while you were asking about the substitutes. So, the big one is breaking the plane on a throw in. You know, the player guarding the inbounder, they reach through and break the plane. That is one. Um,
A free throw huddle. So they keep
free
huddling. I'm
free
going into a free throw after the first attempt. You can put a delay of game warning in the book for that.
Here we go. I should have went to rule 10.
Not being ready after a timeout.
So they're cleaning up water on the court, right, MJ? They're
Yep.
cleaning it up, and we're standing around picking our nose. That's a delay of game warning.
Yep.
And then there's when the clock is not running, consuming a full minute through not being ready when it is time to start either half. And then new this year, and is Jordan Jensen on here? He was correct on this one, and I never got back to him. If you have a player that's kind of giving you some attitude, and when there's a timeout or an out of bounds or a foul, that player's got the ball, or a team that's been doing this has the ball and they look at the officials and they just roll the ball the other direction and don't bounce it to you, and you feel they're doing it on purpose. You can put a team warning in the book for not bouncing the ball directly to an official after a whistle during a dead ball. This has been kind of new in college, women's college a year or two ago. If you remember the LSU Iowa national championship, this is what Caitlin Clark got teed for. Once you have a dead ball, you have a whistle, they just need bounce it to an official. If it's purely incidental, don't go looking for trouble on that one. But if you feel they're purposely tossing the ball or leaving the ball to kind of say screw you to the officials and kind of giving you attitude for it, you can put a delay of game warning in the book for that now as well. That is new this year. And these
Now,
are
the
all
other warning, Eric, if we have a made shot and the shooting team spanks the ball against the wall.
yeah.
Beep, beep.
Yeah, so
My warning. Now, let's say that we get a warning in there. Okay. What happens if the team comes back and does that again or does a different delay of game warning? What happens then?
So in high school, so say they break the plane on a throw in, you put that warning in the book. First half, second half, same team. Now they're trying to set up a press. They make a bucket and they hit the ball out of bounds. That is now a team technical. You're gonna hit the signal for a technical foul. Tell the scorer it's a team technical. And Barb, this kind of covers your question in the chat with the scorer. If you have a team technical situation, whether it's from the flop or the delay game warnings we're talking about right now, go to the scorer, tell them team technical. It doesn't go on any individual or coach. One team foul on the board. So if they were at 4, now they're at 5. The other team gets 2 free throws for anybody on the floor or a substitute they want to bring in, and then a throw in at the division line with 35 on the clock. So Barb had kind of put in there about table personnel, knowing team tech versus not on a player. That goes back to earlier when I say be good communicators. In this situation, somebody should be at the table and explaining it to them, and letting the table personnel know. So yeah,
Because they
one
will not
team.
know. You're,
What's that?
I said they will not know.
Yeah.
We need to tell
Yep.
them whether that's a player tech, a team tech. The bookkeeper will not know.
Yep. So, other than the flop, all those other warnings we talked about, they get one warning for all 5 of those. And then if they do any of those 5 things again later, it's a team tech. The flop is the only one that's its own situation. You get a flop warning and then they have to flop again to get that team tech. The other ones, you get one warning for all the different scenarios. And then if they do any of those a second time, it's a team tech.
Well stated. So let's go back to the throw in because you went through this pretty quick. I'm throwing the ball in. You reach across the plane, and do not contact me. Whistle, delay a game warning on that team. Okay?
Yep.
That's scenario one. Scenario two, you reach across and you crack my arm trying to smack at the ball. What's the call?
So if they touch the thrower in with and foul them, that is an intentional foul. And you got to be really careful here because the next scenario we're going to run through, the resumption of play is different. With an intentional foul, the player that had the ball for the throw in, they have to be your shooter on the free throws. And then you're going to resume play with a throw in at the same spot the intentional foul happened. So if it's a baseline runner, you're going to go all the way to the other end of the court. That player is going to shoot two free throws. You're going to come all the way back down and you're going to have another running baseline throw in. You do not take away the running baseline for a defensive intentional foul.
So what
And then the
happens if
next,
you're in the front court and we have that same play, intentional foul, and it's called intentional, our resumption of play. So we have the person that was fouled shoots. Now what do we do to resume play? We're in the front court.
you go back to that same front court spot where the throw in was, and that team gets a throw in.
How much is on the
Point,
shot clock?
point of
20.
interruption, whatever was on when you called it.
Okay. And do we go to the tick marks or do we go exactly to the spot in that situation?
Point of interruption.
Thank you, MJ. Point of interruption is the spot, and it's also whatever the shot clock is at. So if the shot clock was at 18 seconds, it's going to stay at 18 seconds and going to be exactly at that spot. It's a tricky one if you have an intentional foul because it's point of interruption. So MJ, are we good? Yep. All right. So now, throw in plane. I reach through and I smack the ball out of Eric's hand. Eric, what are we going to do with that one?
So hitting the ball is a technical foul. You will charge a direct technical to the player that hit the ball. Anybody for the other team on the floor or substitute can shoot your technical foul free throws, and then division line throw in with 35 on the shot clock, just like all our other technicals. And then we had a comment in the chat, had a player taking it out, touched the player inbounds as they were trying to release the ball, but never did. I called the violation and gave the ball to the other team, correct? So on a throw in, if the person throwing the ball in reaches the ball through the plane and while they're still touching it, their teammate touches it, correct. Matt Satsky, that is a violation. It has to be passed. You can't have the person out of bounds that's the thrower in touching the ball at the same time as their teammate who is inbounds. That is a violation. If they stick that ball through the plane and the defense touches and grabs it, live ball play on. If they tie it up, the person standing out of bounds throwing it in sticks it across the plane and the defensive player grabs it and they tie it up, we have a jump ball. And you administer whichever team has the AP arrow gets the ball. Does that clear that up? Or answer your question, Matt? I'll
Yes,
take
sir.
that as
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Yep.
Yep.
Okay. Um, any more questions, thoughts?
Yeah, hey,
Please.
Justin Ruberg here. Can you hear me all right?
Yep.
Since we're on the out of bounds topic, I just had a question. So I had it 2 nights in a row. I was in both of my JV games. We have a team in the front court on offense. They make a basket. The defense that's now going to be the new offense is going to take it out on their end line to inbound it. I had the first situation, the new offensive team was taking it to their end line. They split the end line, so 1 foot out of bounds, 1 foot inbounds, and passed the ball in. I then had a situation where I had a girl that didn't even make it to the end line, so she still had 2 feet in bounds. Never once did she go out of bounds. Um, I was at Casson on Saturday and one of these happened, and I had Doug Inman look up to see if there was anything in the rule book on it. I think I did it incorrectly, so I called it dead right away, and I gave it back to the offensive team that's throwing the ball in both situations. My question is, and all we could really find, and I don't have the rule book right in front of me, but once it's at the disposal of that new offensive team, they have to make an attempt to get out of bounds and throw it out of bounds. So, am I correct by saying that even though in the second scenario that she didn't even get out of bounds at all, we still have a violation and we're going the other way?
Correct. Both those scenarios would be a turnover. Um, After a scored basket, it is up to the individual player who's going to be the thrower in to make sure they get legally out of bounds for the throw in. Um, I caution. You gotta love the JV games. If it's a blowout, I think you can get away with being educational and doing what you did. I don't know the score of the games when those happen. Given the situations you're talking about, I could see that these might be lopsided on the scoreboard situations. So, uh, especially the JV pick a time and place, but varsity game, it's a violation. Especially you see it a lot now. These teams, they want to, as soon as the other team scores, they want to be in the front court before the shot clock turns to 34 and putting up a shot. They grab the ball, they barely get out of bounds, and you got to watch their feet because they want to run and gun, and they're trying to fly up and down the court. If they don't, if there's 1 foot touching in bounds and one out of bounds when they make the pass in bounds, you have a violation. If they never get out of bounds, it's a violation. A lot of them, the one I see all the time is they grab the ball, they put 1 foot out of bounds, they pick the other foot in the air, and then they pass it. And if the defense ever cuts in and they stumble, they're going to put that foot down and they're going to have that violation. So, yeah, they need to, it's up to them to get themselves out of bounds and make a legal throw in. So,
So one
MJ,
tip in order to cover that play correctly, and I mentioned this last week when Eric, Jesse, and I sent out some reminders. If you're the lead going to trail, so we have a made basket, they're taking the ball out of bounds. If you're already taking 2 steps into your backcourt and you're looking back to see that throw in, that's going to be a tough play for you uh, to recognize and officiate. Stay out of bounds, stay stationary, and you can see that whole play, whether they take the ball all the way out of bounds or they split it, like Justin said, or they don't even take it out of bounds. If you're moving down court, that's a tough play to make a judgment on.
and then the other one you'll see is some of these teams, well, this person's supposed to throw it in after he made basket. Their teammate will grab it out of bounds, throw it to that person who's in bounds, and they will walk out of bounds. That's not your problem. You now have an out of bounds violation. So also be aware of that play. And then I'll just touch real quick. We had in the chat, just to clarify when we were talking about all these different intentional foul, technical foul scenarios. Thanks, Tom Bromlin, for asking the question. All intentional fouls and technical fouls are shot with the lane cleared, nobody on the lane line. The only difference is intentional foul, the person that got fouled has to shoot the free throws. Technical foul, they can pick anybody on the team. Intentional foul, you're going to go point of interruption. So wherever the ball was, where the foul occurred, if it was live ball or if it was the inbounds play and they got slapped throwing the ball in, you're going to go back to that throw-in spot. technical foul is always going to be 35 seconds division line throw in. So, but all free throws lane cleared.
Are there any other questions? Otherwise, we're gonna look to probably say goodnight here. Here's another one in the chat. If they are fumbling the ball when they are going to throw it in, are we allowed to let them grab the ball inbounds and then step out and toss it in? I don't know if I exactly follow you, Barb.
So so if they go to grab the ball, like that scenario I'm talking about where they're trying to go mock two and get the ball going the other way, and that person's fumbling it and they never fully possess it out of bounds and it dribbles back in the court, I would say yes. I mean, if we bounce the ball to an inbounder and they fumble it and it goes on the court, we're going to kill the throw in and re-administer the throw in. So I would do the same scenario there. Just make sure that they never had possession of it. If they possessed it and then they tried to make a pass and saw the defense and then they fumble it forward on the court, that's a live ball in my opinion in that scenario. But Barb, if you're saying they grabbed it, fumbled it, trying to go too fast out of bounds and then fumbled it back in bounds, yeah, just I would kill it, re-administer the throw in, give them the baseline runner, and then look at him and say, quit eating popcorn at halftime or something. So or slow down and get possession and play within your abilities.
Is there anything else for the good of the cause?
Yeah, I got a quick two-parter here. Is there the first part of this? So if a defender sets up legally to take a charge, they're there in time, they're set, everything's good, but they start to rock backwards before the contact. Is there an axiom that we follow on those?
I
If I
guess
was
you
going to
just
get
kinda,
trucked, I'm going to probably try to absorb it somehow.
I
And that
agree.
might mean like I might turn and I might start to go. And if they truck me, Zach, punch that sucker. It's a player control.
Okay.
Plus, part of the rule says that you can turn to absorb imminent contact. It's just protecting yourself. As long as they've established legal guarding and it's not a flop, I mean, that's why we get paid the big bucks, right? You bet. I agree.
Okay. And then the second part of this now, I had player coming down the left side of the court. The defense sets up on the block, is there for, a solid couple seconds, to be honest with you, before the offender takes off on 1 foot. He goes up and does that like jumping floater thing that a lot of players will do, but he comes
Mhm.
down and his knee hits the chest of that setup defender. I wish I could send it to you guys, but unfortunately the game was not streamed. Is there anything to follow there? I shipped it. But just based off what I described, is there something else to do there?
Well, if the defender's in legal guarding before the offensive player leaves the floor, then you're good to go. Now, the other part of that is a couple years ago, there were some videos about that where the offensive player would kick their foot out in front. So even if the defender wasn't legal, that's not a legal move either.
I guess
So,
Okay, yeah,
go
because he
ahead.
did have his foot out in front, and the contact was with the offender's knee, into the defender's chest.
I'd probably
just
ship that.
what I was gonna say is without seeing the play, how much
Hmm.
contact with the knee are we talking?
Right.
Is it enough to make them stumble backwards and lose their legal position on the floor? Is there enough contact, rhythm, speed, balance, all those things we talk about? If that knee has enough forceful impact that it knocks them off their spot, yeah, you absolutely ship it. If it's a grazing they land and everybody's fine and they don't lose their spot on the floor, I think that's a different scenario than what they were talking about, like MJ brought up with the unnatural leg kick out.
Hmm.
But without seeing your play, I would just go with if that knee caused the defensive player to get moved off their spot on the floor and they were there legally, you ship it.
Yep.
Gotcha. Thank you.
So one philosophical thing, player control block, charge block. Okay. It's been debated since Dr. James Naismith invented this sport back in 1891. All right. If you have a block charge and it's so tight and you're ready to parse through it in the high school game, ship it. Call the player control. It will clean up your game. It will help when they bring the ball hard to the hole that they have to be under control. I will pregame this with Cruz. You get that first block charge and it's a flip of the coin, send it down the court. Everyone in the gym gets the message. Now, if it's clearly a block, I'm going to call a block. But don't get into, well, this. No, if it's 50-50, send it. That's my philosophy. Thanks.
Yeah. Just a scenario to back that up. Had a game Tuesday night, big post player for Stewartville. For the first 10 minutes of the game, every time he got the ball down low, his offensive play was shoulder in, play through, play through, play through, and the defenders just kept kind of giving way. Finally, the defender decided the next time this happens, I'm going to hit the floor when that first shoulder comes. Stewartville coach wanted a flop. It wasn't the most contact in the world, but I shipped it. The next 4 possessions, that Stewartville post player decided a spin move around the defender instead of a shoulder through him was a much better idea, and it cleaned up our game. Now, later into the second half, that Stewartville player looked like he was going to lower the shoulder and spun. Lake City kid hits the floor. Now I gave the Stewartville coach the flop he wanted in the first half, and we stopped having shoulders dropped into chests, and everybody played a much better brand of basketball. So, to Jared's point, if you can call that player control, it will change the game for you.
I agree.
What else we have, folks? Good questions, Mr. Fuller.
Just one note as we roar into the postseason here, when we're putting that ball in play at the 28-foot line, in the front court, sneak a peek at your shot clock, communicate with your crew. If that ball goes to the back court, our new number is, whatever it might be. So if we're putting it in at the 28-foot line and there's, 26 seconds left on the shot clock, just look at one of your partners and go, our new number is 16, so that we don't get caught by surprise there.
One thing for me on a scheduling standpoint, be aware of the cold weather the next 2 days. At Dover Yoda already canceled school tomorrow because of the cold weather, and they already canceled their basketball game tomorrow night. So we'll see what happens with the weather and everything. There are a number of schools that don't have school tomorrow because of the President's Day holiday. But just be aware that the cold weather could cause just a little bit of havoc to the schedule. So we'll see what happens. Eric, anything else?
Just thanks to all of you for donating an hour and a half of your time tonight to get together and go over things and listen and learn and maybe pick up a few things to improve your game. It's fun to have these conversations and all learn together. And as this another great season of basketball starts winding down. So
and heating up.
Enjoy your last game, whenever that may be. Mr. Tom Bromlin, thank you, Tommy, for saying what you said here. Yeah, keep learning, keep improving, and keep serving. Yeah, well stated. Have a good night, everybody.
You bet. Thank you.